Hello, my name is Akim Harriman and I'm here with Professor Amy Verdun from the University of Victoria to talk about theories of European integration and governance. To begin, can you explain what contribution theory can make to understanding the European Union and the European integration process?
So political scientists like to use theories to explain or understand the process of European integration. So from the very outset, the idea was that the theories could help us see what are the actors and mechanisms that play in European integration.
Three of the earliest approaches to theorizing European integration are federalism, neo-functionalism, and intergovernmentalism. These approaches were developed between the 1940s and 1960s, but they are still influential today. What accounts for their lasting significance?
So these theories have helped bring up a whole generation of scholars. Their original interest was in member states as sort of billiard balls. They drew in from international relations and weren't necessarily interested in what happened within the state. And these three theories were able to give us some insight into why integration happens, and they have, in a sense, remained the building block for many generations even beyond. Anytime the EU moves forward, either by deepening or widening, member states will look at these theories, as do scholars, to see how best to understand the process.
One of the approaches you talked about is federalism, and this is an approach that invites comparisons between the EU and Canada, because Canada is a federal system. How do the EU and Canada compare when we view them through the lens of federalism?
So the advantage of federalism is that it gives us a sense of how a federation is developed. So if one looks at scholars of federation or federalism, federation is the state of affairs, federalism is the approach of studying the phenomenon of federations. So Canada is a federal state. It's easy to compare to other federations. The EU is not a federal state, but it has these components that remind us of a federation. So that approach makes it possible for us to make that comparison between this kind of emerging federal state, or if that is what it will be, but it has components of it, and Canada, which is a quite decentralized federation.
Since the 1990s, a number of new theoretical approaches have been developed to study European integration. Can you give some examples and explain how these newer approaches differ from the original theories?
So, since 1992, the Maastricht Treaty has been signed, which created the European Union. At this point in time, the EU started resembling more a federation. And as that happened, it was also more attractive to start learning from other modes of governance. So the approaches that we see happening from the 1990s onwards are those where we can compare the EU to other domains where policymaking is happening. So borrowing from pluralism or from governance or from institutionalism. These are other approaches from which policymaking and governance can be drawn.
How have the recent crises of European integration, the Eurozone crisis, the refugee crisis, Brexit and so on, how have they influenced theorizing about the EU?
So Jean Monnet, one of the founders of the European Union, once said that Europe will be forged in crises. So during these crises, we can see what can be done in order to move the integration process forward. So the crises have put pressure on the EU and have left the EU with opportunities to look at how to improve the integration project. It also has shown some of the limitations of integration. And so in theorizing, one has also looked to these crises to see how integration moves forward or maybe even falls back.